Hi everyone, and welcome back to Whiskey and Walks. So today's episode is going to be the first part of a little two-part mini-series where I detail the adventures that I had going around touring Irish distilleries recently. Recently we had a bank holiday weekend in Ireland, which meant we got an extra day off work, of course, on the Monday, and I took an extra few days off work and decided that I wanted to go and visit some distilleries that I've been meaning to visit for a really long time. I am lucky enough to have access to this amazing camper van. Name suggestions for the camper van down below, by the way, if you wouldn't mind. I'm leaning towards a whiskey wagon, but I think that with Whiskey and Walks and Whiskey Wagon, we're leaning a lot into the W. So if you have another name that you think would be really good, I'd really love to hear it. So today we're going to talk about the first two stops that I made on my little whiskey tour, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the third and final day of my tour. So the first place that I visited was the Tullamore Distillery, which is based in Tullamore, County Offaly. That was a really fantastic distillery experience. I really enjoyed myself. You can take a look now and tell me what you think. I hope that you enjoy.
The first thing that struck me about the Tullamore Distillery was that it's an absolutely beautiful building. The building that currently houses the distillery was built in 2014 when the brand changed ownership and they decided to bring manufacture of Tullamore Dew back to Tullamore. In the waiting area, you can see that there are some beautiful displays about the history of Tullamore Dew with some really interesting artifacts from the company's history, really exciting graphics that tell you some of the kind of milestones of the distillery, and it's just a really cool artistic entrance into the distillery tour. As we were led upstairs, we had Irish coffees, which were prepared by our tour guides Kaylee and Ita, we were treated to a really informative session where we were talked through the distillation process, and it was explained to us how Tullamore prepare the whiskey and the 3 steps of distillation that allow them to make their spirit. Once the classroom session was over, we were treated to a really cool display as the doors peeled back and revealed the distillery floor where they had the mash tuns and the pot stills, and we were invited to ask any questions that we had at that point about the distillation process that we might have had cleared up during the presentation, which was really thorough and in fairness gave me a much better understanding of the distillation process than I had ever had in the past. I really enjoyed seeing some of the older pieces of equipment like the pot stills and the distiller's safe, and I think that was really important for me and felt very apt for a brand that's been around for hundreds of years. My favourite part of the tour, I think, was visiting the barrel house and getting to drink straight from the barrel in the snug. Unfortunately, it's difficult because you are not allowed to bring your phone into the barrel house for fire safety reasons, which is totally reasonable. To finish our tour, we got to taste 3 of Tullamore's offerings: the flagship Tullamore, the rum cask, which is a personal favourite, and the 12-year-old. Overall, I thought this was an absolutely amazing distillery experience, and I'd highly recommend it.
So my visit to Tullamore Dew was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed myself. I think one of the things that's challenging for a lot of distilleries nowadays that are kind of heritage brands, like Tullamore Dew has been around for a really long time, hundreds of years. I think one of the challenges there is trying to blend the history and the heritage of that brand, which is what a lot of people love about Irish whiskey, is the kind of history of it that goes behind some of these older brands, while at the same time acknowledging that like whiskey is made now totally differently than it was back in those days. Some things are the same and will hopefully never change. When we're talking about pot still distillation, when we're talking about aging whiskey in barrels, but in terms of the factory and the manufacturing process, it's so different now. The Tullamore Dew distillery is absolutely fantastic. The building is beautiful. I would definitely recommend anybody to go and see it, nearly just for that alone. It's absolutely fabulous location and building. One of the things that I would mention if you are planning a trip to Tullamore Dew is it is quite a rural distillery. It's certainly the most rural distillery that I've ever been to, so you are probably going to need to have a designated driver, which is not going to be a whole lot of fun for that person because they're going on a tour of a whiskey distillery and they're going to want to taste whiskey towards the end of that tour. But just from its sense of being responsible and making sure that you have a way to get home after the tasting, that is going to be challenging unless you have someone with you who can drive, or if you're going to take a taxi from the town of Tullamore. But I really, really enjoyed that distillery visit. It was absolutely fantastic, and it really gave me a good foundation, I felt like, for the rest of my trip, learning about how whiskey is made. And so stop 2 on my whiskey tour the next day was Waterford Distillery down in County Waterford. I was absolutely blessed on this whole entire whiskey journey, where the sun was amazing. It was so sunny, so bright. It was absolutely fantastic, and it really put me in the best spirits going into the... No pun intended there, that was completely accidental. It put me in the best spirits going into the whiskey distilleries to see how the spirits are made. I was really excited to go and see the Waterford Distillery, because I'm really interested in some of the stuff that they've been doing with terroir and relationships with their farmers and stuff. So I was really excited for it, and I hope that you enjoy finding out what I learned.
I've been really excited to visit Waterford for a long time. It's one of my favourite distilleries and makes some of my absolute favourite whiskies. The reception area, which was where we also did our tasting, was absolutely stunning, and it was decorated with a lot of the different Waterford bottles and offerings. The tour did a really great job of showing us the older side of the distillery, which is based on the old brewery, and then taking us through the more modern section, and it really felt like they wanted us to be hands-on. One of the women in our group even got to make a cut in the distiller's safe between the head and the hearts. Unfortunately, there was a little bit less that I could record in Waterford just because of the layout of the distillery. Maybe I'll get a chance to go back one day. But one of the things that I thought you could really feel was the passion that they had for their whiskey. At the end, we were given samples, shown where that whiskey had come from, and we were able to ask to taste different offerings if it was something we were excited about. I was a little bit surprised at how different the 2 distillery tours were, but I would highly recommend a visit to Waterford for anyone who's a whiskey fan.
So the Waterford Distillery visit was absolutely amazing. I really, really loved it. One of the things that I really enjoyed about Waterford is how in detail on the science of whiskey that they got. We got a chance to speak to Paddy, who is the distiller, and go into the control room where they are kind of monitoring and evaluating all the different aspects of how the whiskey is made to ensure that they have that kind of farm to bottle approach, and it's really transparent for the consumers. That was amazing. I really felt like everyone there was really excited to answer my questions and wanted to hear my questions, and it was really interesting to do a couple of distillery tours back to back just to see what the similarities and differences were between how the different distilleries make the whiskey. Is it effectively exactly the same, or are there kind of meaningful, significant differences that are going to impact it? So that was really interesting for me. One of the things that I really loved about Waterford as well was just the transparency that they have. So when we went in to do the tasting, as we were being poured from bottles of the various different bottles in their range, we were able to go. The tour guide Lauren took us onto the website and showed us through the terroir code exactly which farmer had made that grain, exactly on what date it was brought in, and what date it was distilled, and what date it was put in the casks, and what date the casks were open. It was really amazing to see that whole process laid out. So I thought Waterford was an absolutely fantastic experience. I would definitely recommend anyone who's interested in whiskey to go down to Waterford and try it for yourself, because I thought it was an absolutely fantastic experience. So in tomorrow's episode, we are going to talk about day 3 of my whiskey tour, which took me down to Cork, especially down to Middleton, which is a place that I've been really excited to visit. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any thoughts on what I can name the van, more specifically, or any thoughts on the distillery tours that I did today, Tullamore and Waterford, I would love to hear them down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them down below, and I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe for more videos. Any recommendations on videos you'd like to see would be really, really appreciated.